Hello and welcome to the ROKER RAPPORT podcast in association with Sunderland Soup Kitchen. It's Jimmy here and I'm delighted to say I've been joined by Tom from the What a Load of Cobblers fanzine. Tom, how are you doing?
Very well, mate. It's a pleasure to be on and looking forward to the game on Saturday.
Good stuff, good stuff. Well, we're here to preview what will hopefully be Sunderland's return to football on Saturday. We're recording on a Thursday afternoon and at the time of recording at least, the game is on. Tom, Northampton Town are quite an interesting opponent for Sunderland to return to football after the COVID self-isolation for, because really out of all the League One teams for me, and I'm sure a lot of other Sunderland fans, you may be the team I know the least about. So I was sort of wanting to get a bit of a lowdown on how your season's been going so far.
Yeah, it's not been going great particularly. We're a new club to League One. We got promoted last season via the playoffs with, shall I say, an industrial style of play, which was very effective, especially in that brief period where, we won at Wembley, we beat Exeter and we really demolished them with this very direct style of play. And we're just adjusting now to League One. And it's been quite difficult because I found that opposition managers are getting a bit cuter to Keith Carroll's tactics and he's looking to try and expand the play a little bit and, finding problems, trying to be a bit more expansive. So we're winning the odd game here and there, which is just about keeping us outside the relegation zone, but we're also getting tonked. We lost 4-0 twice in a row a couple of games back, which is obviously concerning.
Both to good teams, if I remember right. Was it Oxford and Lincoln?
Yeah. Oxford, we usually beat Oxford, so that was slightly worrying for Northampton fans that we'd lost this sort of hoodoo over Oxford, and they overwhelmed us. And then Lincoln are, they're a very strong outfit and they've got half decent manager there. So bit of a baptism of fire for League One, but we're just trying to find our feet. And what I would say is that, Saturday's no, foregone conclusion. We're very good at spoiling tactics and we can actually take points off of bigger clubs. So it would be an interesting tussle and probably a clash of styles as it has been for most games this season.
Yeah, no, that'll be interesting because weirdly this far into the season, we've not played too many teams like that. Like the game that sticks out in my head is we played Gillingham and we won that game. We didn't deserve to win that game and we got a bit lucky that they shot themselves in the foot. But we've not really played too many teams that have kind of been direct and kind of got at us, and we handled that game really poorly. So I'll be interested to see under a new manager what we look like out of the break. Obviously, a team haven't been able to train a lot, whether we handle that better. One thing I sort of wanted to touch on was obviously, like you mentioned, you went up via the playoffs in weird circumstances with the shortened season.
Yep.
Has this struggle, was it expected? So what's the mood with Northampton Town fans? How the season's played out versus expectations?
It's a good question. I think that the struggles, could have been telegraphed when you looked at the pre-season recruitment wasn't as strong as probably we'd liked. The budget has gone down, obviously, because of COVID, as it has done at a lot of clubs. We lost a lot of key players from that promotion season that were actually really specialists in the direct style of play that Keith Carroll likes to play. So Charlie Good, he got sold to Brentford, went up a couple of divisions. Jordan Turnbull, we lost. Alan McCormack was a very steady in midfielder. We lost Vidane Oliver. We talk about Gillingham. He went to Gillingham. He's probably the ace target man of League One, just absolute specialist in this position. So we lost him. And in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions, we haven't really, recruited as well. So that, signposts a struggle. And the fans, fans have by and large are quite understanding of Keith Carroll and that we were always going to have a bit of a bedding in period. But some of the football we've been playing, especially in those 2-4-0 defeats, has been so ineffective and ugly on the eye that there is a bit of a backlash against Keith Carroll's style of play. And I've got question marks whether he can stick to his principles and also try and keep the ball on the pitch a bit more, because they seem to be quite contradictory. And I think that'll be our struggle going forward, really.
Yeah, we've sort of circled around it a bit. Are you one of the most direct teams in the league? One of the more physical teams? Is it sort of going to be direct football that we can expect on Saturday?
It's quite a contentious one because I don't think that I'm not a fan of Keith Carroll's style of play, and a lot of Northampton fans are, and they don't care how we play as long as we win. Whereas I'm maybe a bit more older in the tooth, and I do think you can play slightly expansive football and try and win games as well. And there are teams in the division, especially teams like Crewe, that do that. They punch above their weight and they have their own philosophy of playing. So the style of play for me, it's concerning for a couple of reasons. It's all very well, playing a direct style if it's effective and you've got the right personnel for it. There's plenty of clubs that have done well with it. Wimbledon go back in the day, and you can look at Stoke and Wickham, but I just don't feel at the moment we have those specialist players to do that style of play, and we don't particularly keep the ball very well. So our possession has been down at, this is another hot topic in Northampton, the possession has often been down like 35%, even lower. And it sort of boils down to whether you want to watch games where your team doesn't really have the ball that much. When we win, it's great, but when we lose, it's not the best to watch.
On Saturday, might it be a case of, if Sunderland start the game well, Northampton are sat 30 yards out and sort of really put the impetus on Sunderland to try and create, and Northampton will look to get out on the counter?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We've fallen behind the ball in lots of games, part of the bus to an extent. We can actually counter-attack really well, and that is part of our game. Our game is based around harrying the opposition. We don't want to give the opposition a second. We put a lot of long balls and set pieces into the box, so we'll test your defence. We'll press you quite heavily and just try and nick you on the break. It's quite a difficult style to play against, and teams don't like playing us, especially at home. Our pitch is not great at the moment. So, but away, just expect to, if we're on it like we were, on Tuesday night for Gillingham, just expect a hard-working team that puts a lot of crosses and set pieces into the box. It tries to feed off scraps and just doesn't give you a minute. It just depends on how fresh you are from your COVID-19, break and stuff, and what players you've actually got available, because we haven't really mentioned that yet. And, how you can face up to Keith Curle, who's a very wily manager, to give him his credit. He's been around the block, and he's quite tactically astute at finding holes in opposition's, tactics. So that'll be an interesting one.
Unfortunately, at this stage, we just don't know. Obviously, the club's taken the route of saying, well, it's a personal thing. We don't want to tell you who caught COVID, who didn't, who's feeling good, who isn't. We know that the Academy of Light reopened, so Sunderland players have started to get back into training, but we don't know who's been training, who hasn't. And I think one of the things with Sunderland is, and sort of with that draw against AFC Wimbledon that really frustrated me personally, is I always think one of our big strengths, maybe our ace in the hole versus the other 23 teams in the league, should be our squad depth. Sure. So I kind of looked at the team we put out against AFC Wimbledon and was a bit disappointed that I didn't see more, that we still looked so lethargic, even though obviously it was extreme circumstances. A lot of players that played wouldn't have known they were playing when they woke up that day. Yeah. Preparation all over the shop. I still was expecting more. I still was a bit disappointed at fringe players that we've been wanting to see not really grasping the opportunity they had. So it's the big problem with Sunderland in the last month or so has been a failure to break down teams that really sort of give us the impetus and dare us to break them down. I mean, we drew 1-1 against Burton in a game where I was amazed they scored. They barely crossed the halfway line. Wigan beat us with their only shot. Yeah. We drew against AFC Wimbledon, who, to be fair, actually probably edged the game, but we're also a team whose sort of game plan in that first 45 minutes was to sit back. So it's going to be a real test of how the team's evolving, where the team's at under Lee Johnson at this early stage. I think that's what makes it a really interesting game. I wanted to sort of just step back a bit and sort of do a bit more big picture Northampton stuff. We've sort of mentioned the win against Gillingham on Tuesday. Yeah. Did that feel like a turning point, a one-off? What's sort of been the reaction to that result?
I think the reaction is mainly relief. Keith Curle was most definitely under pressure for various reasons. Not least I've talked about the 2 4-0 defeats. You can't go too many 4-0 defeats and not be under pressure. So Keith Curle has his critics, but it gives him a little bit of leeway, that victory, and it just gets us out of that relegation zone. In terms of, a form guide for the rest of our games going forward, because it's still going to be a very difficult month, I wouldn't say it's much of a form guide. We scored 3 goals. One of them was a penalty. One of them was a cross that went straight in from a free kick. The other one was a tap-in. So before that, I think we were one of the lowest scoring teams in the division, and scoring goals has been a real problem for us. So I'm not massively confident going into Saturday's game, but like you've just said, it might well be a case of, can you break us down? We've brought in, funnily enough, 2 short-term signings in centre-back, which has been pretty crucial, really, and I would say added to Tuesday night's win. A guy called Alan Sheehan, who's been with Cobblers for a while, training and stuff. He used to play for Luton Town, but he's quite an accomplished player, a bit of poise about him, which Cobblers hasn't really had this season. So he's coming as a player coach role to steady the ship. He was an important one. We'll see how Cobblers' defence stands up to Sunderland's team, whatever you put out. I would say, looking from our perspective, have you got any wide players that are rapid? Because we often play a wing-back system, and I always think our weakness is getting in behind our wing-backs, and especially if you can switch the ball at pace, that often drags our wing-backs out of position.
One of the things that Sunderland fans always go on about, that our last two managers have gone on about, is a sort of lack of game-changing pace in our team. We've got Lyndon Gooch, who's pretty quick, but he's a guy who likes to dribble with the ball. He's a guy who likes to use his pace to sort of open up spaces, but doesn't run in behind that much. We've got Denver Hume, who's our left wing back / full back, depending on what formation we step out on, who was injured. I don't know if he's got a chance to be back, given that we've not played for 2 weeks, but he's a guy who can, once again, dribble with the ball, use 1-2s to get in behind. But it's one of the weak points of the team, is that all of our strikers are quite slow, maybe with the exception of Will Grigg, but it's been a problem that we do have to kind of play in front of teams and have to rely on sort of individual magic or combination play that we haven't really seen enough of to open teams up.
It's something that I've seen from a lot of League One teams. League One is much of a muchness to me in a lot of ways. There are quite a few teams that will park the bus, especially against Sunderland, but just maybe because of your reputation as a big club in the league, they'll relish trying to, just sit back and see what you can do. But I really think it's crucial that clubs need players with a bit of guile, a bit of skill, a bit of a turn of pace, and match winners in their side to break down sides like Northampton and Gillingham even. But I'm not seeing too many standout players of that effect in League One this season. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, it's something that I think about quite a bit, because we keep on hearing Sunderland need more pace and power. Why don't Sunderland recruit more pace and power? And I'm like, if it was easy, we'd have done it. If it was an easy thing to do and these players grew on trees, I'm sure we would have grabbed one. And it is. It's one of those things, really. When it comes to avoiding relegation, we've talked a lot about sort of a split among Northampton fans. Is that another thing where, depending on who you speak to, they'll say, yeah, we're pretty confident, or is there kind of a lot of doom mongers still out there after the 4-0s?
I don't think it's sort of doom mongering. I would say I'm fairly pessimistic about it. I don't think it's doom mongering. I think it's just literally taking the results at face value. So we tend to go in fits and spurts. So we win one game here when we need to. We beat Fleetwood, for instance, 1-0. I think that was from a set piece as well. Then we'll go 3 or 4 losses, and then we'll pull a winner out of the bag. And so it's hard to sort of get any genuine form going to make any real optimism. Some people were saying after the 2 4-0ers, I don't necessarily go with this myself, but some people were saying that gap should have been used to relieve Keith Cole of his job and replace him with someone else who, capable of playing a bit of football and trying to get us out of our predicament by attacking games, rather than just trying to sort of be reactive and try and nullify opposition, is one of Keith Cole's favourite phrases. But that's a difficult one. I think maybe sometimes you need a bit of experience like Keith Cole's got, so maybe he will be able to pull a few results out of the bag and keep us above that line. But it's difficult watching Cobblers every week, because like I said, we don't have much possession, we don't keep the ball that well, so it's squeaky bum time in a lot of games. Hopefully we can try and be a bit more expansive on Saturday.
Is it realistic that he might go before the end of the season?
Is it realistic? It's a difficult one. I think in normal times you would say it was fairly realistic, because sometimes if a manager isn't on the longest of contracts, sometimes you will speculate to accumulate, won't you? And you'll try and, if there's quite a lot of good managers available, you might gamble a little bit. But I think the chairman is fairly, with COVID, the budget isn't the biggest, and the chairman he just got us promoted, so the chairman isn't trigger happy at all. So I would suggest it would take basically us being adrift in League One for him to be replaced by someone. But yeah, that's a bit of a hot potato at the moment, that one.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one, because I remember doing the preview for Portsmouth, and it was like, the fans absolutely want the manager to go, and there's no way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
In most situations, like the situation Sunderland just had, it's normally somewhere closer to the middle, where it's like a bad result here and there. There is a cut-off point where maybe maybe they'll look at doing something different. So with Cal, is it a case of does the style of football suit the players? is he maybe a little bit out of his depth? Is that something that's been discussed? Because most of his career has been down in League Two, hasn't it, as a manager?
Yeah, that's another good question. I suppose it's hard to judge if someone's out of their depth. I would go back to whether he can try and expand the football a bit. So he brought in Alan Sheehan from Luton. We had McCormack as well. He also used to play for Luton, and they were, two accomplished players. So Sheehan can pass the ball around nicely, and I think he's setting actually the benchmark for Northampton players because he's very comfortable on the ball, and that's not what a lot of Northampton players are. We're not that comfortable on the ball. We try and move the ball around so quickly all the time that I think a lot of good moves are lost to an extent. So in terms of if Keith Kell can turn it around and stuff, and it's going to be a difficult one. I just think that sometimes the way that Kell wants to play, like I've said before, it actually is very effective. Not great to watch, but effective when it works. I think it's sort of contradictory to an expansive style. I just think there's this conflict there between trying to keep the ball a bit better and trying to get the ball up the pitch as fast as he wants to. There's a bit of a conflict there. So you'll see on Saturday, and like I said before, I think it will all boil down to whether you can break us down and whether you actually have the match winners, because we can make it really difficult for you to score, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm dreading. I've seen too many games involving Sunderland recently where we've just been found wanting against low block teams, and you've brought me down a step here, Tom. You brought me down previewing this one. I've had a nice stress-free Christmas without having to worry about Sunderland, and now you've got me sweating Sunderland results again. It's all gone wrong. We'll move on to happier subjects. Who've been some of Northampton's standout players this year?
Yeah, obviously it's been a difficult season. We're down the bottom, so we haven't got any Lionel Messi's in there, really. I really like a guy called Sean McWilliams, who's a homegrown player, comes from Kings Heath in Northampton, and everyone likes to see a player come through. He's a very tenacious central midfielder, defensive centre midfielder. He really loves to tackle. He's good at breaking up the play, but he's also quite good at moving the ball forward. So he's got that bit of agility and guile in the middle that I really like. He's only 22 as well, so I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. The only thing I would say is he's come back from injury, so whether he'll start on Saturday is difficult. Keith Kell's a bit of a tinker man, so if we were talking about what team we're going to put out, wouldn't necessarily be able to say. But Sean McWilliams is definitely one to watch. He's got a brother that left us to join Cardiff as well, so he's a good one. And there's a striker I'm keeping an eye on. He doesn't really play week in, week out. He comes on for like 20, 30-minute cameos, but he's called Caleb Chukwuemeka. He's under 20. His brother actually came through at Northampton. They both came through at Northampton, but his brother is called Carney Chukwuemeka, and he came through at Northampton and was taken by Aston Villa under the Elite Player Performance Plan. And he's now one of the England, under 20 age group brightest hopes, Carney Chukwuemeka. So there's obviously talent in that family. Caleb is a tall, rangy striker with good movement, good anticipation, good first touch. And for me, he's one of our best strikers, and I would really like to see him play more. But because he's only, under 20 and Keith Kell's finding things difficult, he often will go with a bit of experience. It's often the way, isn't it?
Cool. Yeah, so that's one. If I see that big surname and there's 20 minutes to go and it's a close game, considering our players haven't been training, that's one to worry about. That's one that Sunderland fans should be sweating, I guess.
No one can pronounce his surname. It's interesting if you listen to any comms. It's like, here comes Chukwuemeka. I can't say it, but yeah, it's Chukwuemeka if you actually have to pronounce it. He's a good player, and apparently Villa. The interesting thing about him is he hasn't actually signed a pro deal at Northampton yet. So he's in this sort of strange vacuum period of not signing a pro deal, but bigger clubs allegedly been interested. So according to the Daily Mail a few months ago, Villa, Kel Surprise, whose brother plays for, is interested. And of all clubs, Club Bruges. So that's an interesting one. I'm interested to see if he actually ever signs a pro contract for us, or he's sort of swept away by a bigger club for that. But I'd like to see homegrown players, and I would like to see a bit more of it.
Yeah, if they're coming from abroad to see him, that's not a bad thing. That's certainly a sign. Well, it might in the long run, but that's certainly not a bad sign in the short term for you guys if he's attracting that kind of interest. You've done a good job, Tom, of laying out sort of what kind of games Sunderland can expect, how it might go, the way Northampton are going to approach the game.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, to finish things up, we've got to get to score predictions. Are you going to carry on that running run?
I'm actually fairly high in the score prediction league, so I wouldn't. To be honest with you, I wouldn't take my vote with any credence. But The way it's gone is we'll win one game and then we'll lose a few. And, I think the way Keith Cole tends to set up, and I don't know if this happens in football, it might do, it might not, that they put everything into games they think are winnable. So they'll put everything into the Fleetwood game. They'll throw everything at the Gillingham game. The Sunderland game, I think you're going to have more of the ball, definitely. I don't want to go on for too long, but the centre midfield is going to be really important. If you can make our centre midfield, if you can unpick that a little bit, that's often been a weak area for us. So I reckon, cut a long story short, I think it's going to be 2-0 Sunderland. Yeah, I just think the quality will pay overall.
Yeah, fair enough. I know that Allardyce is a manager who always used to do that. Circle the winnable games.
Yeah.
These are the games that we need points from. And then if you don't get sown in the bigger ones, then so be it. But yeah, no, that's filled me with a bit more confidence. You're picking me back up. I always predict a Sunderland win when I do these things. I feel like I'm morally obliged to when we're in League One, and so I'll do that. I'll go 1-0. You've made Northampton sound like the sort of team that Sunderland are rubbish at playing against.
Yeah.
So I'll cover my bases and go 1-0.
What I would say before I go is that I reckon if we won 1-0, that wouldn't be a surprise either, because Keith Cole will absolutely relish playing against Sunderland. He loves trying to get one over the bigger teams, and he loves I'm picking a side that are trying to go out and give us a good kicking. So if we win 1-0, that wouldn't surprise me either, but I will go with 2-0 for Sunderland.
Fair enough. And that's a good point. It's something we've seen across our time in this league. We've gone through months where we handle the pressure of being the big club well. We've gone through months where we don't, and it's just one of those things. I mean, especially early on, we went behind in a lot of games because teams were just that bit more up for playing Sunderland. So it's always a factor worth bringing up. Tom, thanks so much for your time this afternoon, and all the best after Saturday. And thanks everyone for listening. Stay subscribed. I don't know what we'll have up for you. That depends on what the EFL do, what Sunderland do, but we'll definitely have more podcasts for you, whether it's match reaction or former player interviews or something else. We'll definitely have something lined up, so stay subscribed, and thanks very much for listening this afternoon.